Hi, it's my real pleasure to be with you today and to give this presentation on predicting biological invasions globally. I'm Helen Roy and I'm from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and the work that I'm going to be presenting is that, hundreds of collaborators have been involved, and indeed thousands of volunteers have also made inspiring contributions to provide information to underpin our understanding of biological invasions globally. So we know that biodiversity is declining faster than at any other time in human history. And we know from the IPBES global assessment that was published in 2019, the very stark figure that 1 million species are at risk of extinction. We've been hearing a lot through COP26 of the ways in which climate change is causing biodiversity loss and the interconnectivity amongst various drivers of change that are leading to this unprecedented decline in our natural world. So we hear a lot about climate change, but we also know that land and sea use change, direct exploitation, pollution, and invasive alien species are all taking their toll on biodiversity and causing biodiversity change. And also that there's interactions amongst these different drives of change. Just thinking about non-native species, so these are species that have been moved from one part of the world to another by humans, with humans being the really important element there. We know that, for example, just in Britain alone, there's about 2,000 non-native species. And we use the term invasive when we're thinking about those that have some kind of impact either on biodiversity or ecosystems or human health or economies. And we know, for example, of those 2,000 species in Britain, that about 12% cause some serious adverse impacts and as such are classed as invasive. So the global assessment that was published by IPBES in 2019 called for transformative change. And just as mentioned, we've been hearing through COP26 that the science is clear. Unprecedented changes in climate and biodiversity, which are driven by our activities, by human activities, have combined and increasingly threatened nature, human lives, livelihoods, and well-being around the world. And that there is a crucial moment at which we could make a difference for going forward. And addressing biological invasions is one of those differences that we can make. So I've already mentioned around this definition of non-native or alien species, and I apologize for using those terms synonymously. But these are species, as I mentioned, introduced by humans outside of their native range. And I'm passionate about ladybirds, so I give an example of a ladybird here. This is the briny ladybird, Hennis argus, and it was a new arrival to the UK back in the mid-1990s. And you can see from this distribution map here that it's not spread very far at all, and it just feeds on white bryony. For me, it's a pleasure to see it, and it's not of concern at all. In contrast, what we can see here is the harlequin ladybird. This is a species that is native to Asia, introduced around the world as a biological control agent, but never intentionally introduced to the UK, but it arrived with the first record in 2004 and spread very rapidly. And you can see for this map here, it spread at about 80 to 100 kilometers per year. It's a voracious aphid predator, but will feed on a whole variety of other insects as well. Can also be a bit of a human nuisance in terms of the numbers that it accumulates in within people's houses through the winter months. And so we would term this an invasive non-native or invasive alien species, one that threatens biodiversity, ecosystems, or the way we live. And it's really important that we document invasive non-native or invasive alien species. And we've been working on this through a DEFRA-funded project, Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs project within Britain, to compile information on all of the non-native species. And what we can see is that year on year, if we just look at that subset that are invasive, we can see the increase across all systems, freshwater, marine, and terrestrial. And by gathering this information together, we can underpin the biodiversity indicator that's published on an annual basis to show that current status of invasive non-native species within Britain. And this is a partnership with National Capability Funding through UK SCAPE, but also with the Joint Nature Conservation Committee and the GB Non-Native Species Secretariat, and also funding from DEFRA. And with all of that information, we can add it to global data sets. And some work that Hanno Siebens did that he published a few years ago in Nature showed that when we look at these global data sets, we see the same picture happening everywhere, in all environments, for all taxa, everywhere around the world. The number of non-native or alien species arriving in new places is increasing year on year. And I think perhaps what's also surprising, though, is that there's no sign of slowing. There's no saturation in that accumulation of alien species worldwide. It's great that we can document biological invasions in that way. But really, if we're to do something about them, then managing pathways is the most effective way to address the problem of biological invasion. So that's preventing their arrival in the first place. And to do that, we need to make some predictions about what might be those new arrivals. And we've been doing a lot of work on this. And I just thought I'd show this picture here, for example, of Grand Cayman, just to give a few examples of some of the alien species that we're thinking about through these studies. So this is a group of islands within the Caribbean, and you can see on that beach there is this quite profuse amount of seaweed, of an alien seaweed, that is causing problems on the coastal ecosystems, but also societally causing issues as well, in terms of it just begins to rot in these huge piles of seaweed, and has various effects as a consequence of that. But also you might spot underneath the car there's a little green iguana, actually not that small, quite a large green iguana. And these are a new arrival to Grand Cayman. And when we were there back in 2018, there were about 1 million individuals. And the estimates at that time would be that the population could double on an annual basis. That's a huge number of green iguana. They cause problems for infrastructure, they cause outages of electricity when they climb amongst the wires, but perhaps more troubling is that they also pose a threat to the endemic blue iguana that is present there in the Cayman Islands. And so at the moment they've got an active eradication program in place to try and reduce the numbers of that alien species. So we've been working with people all around the world to carry out some expert elicitation processes for horizon scanning. And really, it's been incredible to work with so many people providing so much expertise in many simply amazing places. And we published this paper on the guiding principles for utilizing the social influence within expert elicitation to inform conservation decision making, because the process that I'm about to describe does have could introduce some biases, and this is the guiding principles of the ways in which we work to prevent as many of those biases from creeping in as we absolutely possibly can, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So one of the things about biological invasions and gathering information across all environments and all taxa is that we often have vast gaps in our knowledge and understanding, and we don't have time necessarily to be able to go out and study every single species that could cause a potential problem. So we're really reliant on gathering the best available information that we can, but also eliciting information and knowledge from experts to be able to fill in some of those gaps. And we do this through a process of working in small and quite specialist groups, such as working with the plant people working together, the freshwater invertebrate people working together. And they compile lots and lots of information. And then we bring all of those various taxonomic and environmental experts together and all of the information they've gathered together to produce a ranked list of invasive alien species by sitting and chatting and talking through the species and just really thinking about, does this species, is this more of a risk than this other species, and what are the kind of threats that it might pose? And we come out with a priority list as a consequence. So just thinking about those guiding principles, we found it's really important to clearly define the scope of the study. Where is it that you're doing the horizon scanning for? It's really important to have a diversity of experts and to really empower those experts to work with one another, to acknowledge the gaps that they may have or the gaps that there may be in the evidence, but then to pull together the best available information that they have and to share that experience and knowledge. And along the way, documenting the decisions, capturing and communicating the confidence so that we can produce these really robust lists of invasive alien species that pose a threat in one place or another around the world. So it's been really amazing to visit some inspiring places and to work with inspiring people. And this is a picture of the cloud forest in St. Helena, and the spiky plant at the front is New Zealand flax, which has invaded a number of the important habitats within St. Helena. And really this work is all about trying to prevent these kind of species arriving in the future. So we score biodiversity and ecosystem impacts, and we use the IUCN ICAT categories and criteria, the environmental impact classification of alien taxa. We also score socio-economic impacts, and we use the socio-economic impact classification of alien taxa, SciCat, to do that. And I've put the paper here because this is a relatively new system, particularly in comparison to that environmental impact classification system. And it'd be really wonderful if you read it and let us know what you think and how workable it might be within the context that you might wish to use it. But it certainly has provided us with a framework for scoring these species. It's important to note, of course, that many of the invasive alien species have multiple impacts. So that is, they might have a biodiversity and ecosystem impact, but they might also have a human health or an economic impact as well. And we see that, for example, with these aquatic plants. They for sure change the ecosystems in which they arrive, but they can also make those systems not only in terms of biodiversity declines, but also in terms of abilities to navigate those systems, or maybe they cause intense eutrophication that has other impacts beyond biodiversity and ecosystems. So we've used this approach, first of all, in Britain back in 2013 for the horizon scanning, and subsequently we've repeated that exercise in 2019 for Britain. But we've also used the same approach for the whole of the European Union. We've also carried out this approach on the Cyprus, in Cyprus and the Mediterranean island, and also for the UK overseas territories, and most recently published the horizon scanning list for the Antarctic Peninsula region. These prioritized lists are used in lots of different ways. They can be used to underpin risk assessments. So, for example, the European Commission exercise that we carried out, the list of species that we produced was a sort of starting point for which species should then go through for a full risk assessment process. And ultimately, those that are deemed to be a very high risk be added to the list of union concern. But it also can be that they're used for implementing monitoring and action. And this is a paper that I just mentioned here from Olaf Boy on using structured eradication feasibility methods for prioritizing management of new and also emerging invasive alien species. It can also be for enhancing biosecurity in one way or another, or for communication campaigns and raising awareness. So in terms of predicting biological evasions, this is our most recent list from the horizon scanning activity that we carried out in Britain in 2019. And Vespa velutina is a species that we are extremely concerned about in Britain, the Asian hornet or yellow-legged hornet. You can also see in our very top list a number of other insect species, also the two-leaf water milfoil, the plant, some mammals such as the raccoon and the raccoon dog, and a variety of freshwater and aquatic and marine species as well. But just thinking for a moment about the Asian hornet. The Asian hornet was on the horizon scanning list for Britain back in 2013. And almost immediately there was an alert system put into place for Vespa velutina. And we developed an app, the Asian Hornet Watch app, very, very rapidly with funding from the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. We've done an awful lot of publicity and promotion around raising awareness, working with beekeeping communities, for example, to be on the lookout for this particular species. And we know that the Asian hornet is problematic for beekeepers, preying on honeybees, but also wild pollinators as well. And it's been really exciting to hear of the research that's been coming out of a variety of different European countries, looking at those impacts in a lot more detail. What you can see on this, the small graph here is that year on year, these are the number of suspected reports of Asian hornets that we receive through the alert system. And you can see that we receive thousands and thousands of records. Every year, though, there's only actually a couple of records of that we verify as being Vespa velutina. The vast majority of reports are other species, such as the European hornet. So it's really amazing that we managed to tease out from all of those records the few that are actually Asian hornets. And we've been very successful in working in partnership with the National Bee Unit and the Non-Native Species Secretariat for the eradication campaigns. And every year, year on year, there have been a couple of records, sightings of Asian hornets, and the nests have been found and eradicated. And we've had new records throughout this autumn in 2021. And again, there has been that eradication. But you'll be thinking, of course, that that's an awful lot of information to be going through to tease out those few examples of Asian hornet. So we've been thinking about whether image analysis can help us within our alert system, and we've been trialing it on ladybirds as well as on Vespa velutina, and it's really showing some promise. And we've published a paper here, Thinking Like a Naturalist, around enhancing computer vision of citizen science images by harnessing the contextual data and using metadata alongside the records that are coming in. And it's showing some promise, but we're not quite ready to be using it fully yet. We've also been doing some modelling work to look at, so what if we hadn't eradicated the Asian hornet in Britain? What would that have meant in terms of future spread? So we've been coupling environmental suitability models with spread models to look at this in more detail. And on the left-hand side, you can see that the green showing the highly suitable areas of the UK for the Asian hornet, then not surprisingly, perhaps, it would find very suitable habitats and environments across the UK. Perhaps some patches in Scotland, which would be less suitable, but many places that would be suitable. Then looking at coupling that with spread and noting that we've only used natural spread here, we haven't included that element of humans moving the Asian hornet around with them as well. So this is very much a kind of conservative estimate, if you like. We could see that from those reddish and pink areas that the Asian hornet could have spread really quite far and wide. And this has been work that we've done with funding from DEFRA, but also the European Commission, and we've been looking more widely across Europe at the potential spread of Asian hornets. We've also been taking these lists that I mentioned that we've been, for all of the UK overseas territories, we have constructed these lists and working in partnership with the amazing experts who are based on these territories. And we're now beginning to think about the spread of some of these species within these island groups. And a couple of years ago, we worked with the Turks and Caicos Islands and also with Anguilla, again with their amazing experts, to think about some of the species that could potentially have quite a limited distribution at the moment, but could be spreading to some of the other islands within those territories going forward. And then thinking about, can we prioritize some of those species for eradication, and what would the feasibility be? So, for example, on Anguilla, again, thinking back to these iguanas that I mentioned, the green iguana has also arrived within other Caribbean islands. And these Caribbean islands also have their endemic species. So is it possible that the green iguana could spread to some of the islands around within that Anguilla territory and pose a threat to the endemic iguana in this case. And we've carried out similar works on Turks and Caicos Islands, and not just for the iguana, although I do show you the endemic Turks and Caicos iguana here as well, which is a really, really beautiful species on a really very beautiful beach. But we've also, of course, been looking at other species as well and plants within these terrestrial environments. And we're just about to embark on a similar work looking at spread of species in St. Helena and also Tristan da Cunha, and what might be the feasibility of eradication for some of these. Noting that, of course, within these UK overseas territories, we have so much to learn in terms of the amazing actions that they are already implementing within these island groups. So it really is fantastic to have the opportunity to work with these territories and to make further predictions around biological invasions in these really important areas of the world. For example, St. Helena has more than 400 endemic invertebrate species. So they're species not found anywhere else in the world. And so really important habitats to be protecting and safeguarding into the future. And as I said, it's just been incredible to work with experts in these amazing far-flung lands who share their experiences so generously. So just to summarize, collaborations and partnerships are really critical to address the huge global environmental issues. And hopefully I've shown with you the importance of these partnerships and the working together to sort of bridge some of these knowledge gaps that we have as well, and to be able to predict biological invasions to ultimately inform action. But by working together and engaging people in decisions and action is what can lead to transformative change, and is an absolute joy as well. So thank you so much to all of the inspiring people who've contributed so much to this work, the project teams, the infrastructure teams, the collaborators, the funders, the volunteers. It's just been fantastic working with you all. I just thought I'd end on a note to mention the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the IPBES, has an ongoing assessment at the moment, a thematic assessment, for which I'm really grateful to be one of the co-chairs, and it will be delivered in 2023. But the second external review process is going to be opening in the coming months. So I'd really urge you to visit the IPBES website and sign up to be an expert reviewer on that thematic assessment. We'd be really delighted to hear from you. Well, thank you again for inviting me along. I look forward to hearing from you all and collaborating going forward. Thank you very much.